All right. So, in the last couple slides, and I'm looking to finish this video, we'll see, we are talking about regulating the fluid volume in the body and the body's composition. So, last video, we were really talking about what the kidney, how we target the kidney and keep its flow constant. So, here, again, volume of blood, volume of fluids, like lymph and interstitial and so forth, and their concentrations must be preserved. And I do remind you one more time that blood volume influences blood pressure. That's why we generally talk about these two things together. So volume sensors are measuring blood pressure. We've already talked about this. We're just reminding you that baroreceptors, right, located, we talked specifically about ones located in the aortic arch and the carotid bodies, right, when we talked about the cardiovascular system. And they're located a few other places in the body. So baroreceptors cause vasodilation when stimulated, right? So increased pressure, right, which increases glomerular filtration rate and water loss, okay? So that's what we want. So we have an increase in pressure and we have to decrease that pressure, right? So we're going to get more flow to the kidneys, and this is going to increase the rate of filtrate forming, and that rate is going to push it through the proximal convoluted tubules a little faster. So we're going to lose some water via the urine, right? And we're going to restore our pressure, our volume and our pressure. And they vasoconstrict when they're not. And this, again, is a decrease in pressure. So, and if there's a decrease in blood pressure, blood volume, we'll decrease glomerular filtration rate, and we will decrease the amount of water lost, therefore, because there'll be less filtrate forming and therefore less water loss in the collecting tubes. So again, this enzyme chemical renin, right? I said the granular cells in the afferent arteriole, so they're called the juxtaglomerular cells, and they're part of the juxtaglomerular apparatus, is released when blood pressure drops. So this, again, this is a systemic response. So this is happening in the kidneys, but it's influencing the entire body. Right? So blood volume is changed by hormones. Again, what we've already looked at, atrial natriuretic hormone, right? Antidiuretic hormone. So these are specific hormones influencing blood volume. Atrial natriuretic, right? I say the cardiomyocytes, so the heart cells in the atria, are stretch receptors too, like the baroreceptors. And as blood pressure rises, right, and it could rise because blood volume has gone up, this hormone, right, is released by these cells. Sodium and water are not reabsorbed, right? And this is basically because fluid is going to move through the whole renal tubule faster. We're not going to, this is going to tell the principal cells and cells in the distal convoluted tubules not to put in those sodium transporters, right? So urine volume increases, but blood volume and pressure decreases. Again, you got to think about what's leaving the body is urine and solutes and volume and water, right? And water, of course, related to volume, means that the body, right, if it's more is leaving there, then less is in the body. So we have to think of what's happening here as opposites, right? If there's less leaving the body as urine, then there's more in the body and in the blood specifically, right? So antidiuretic hormone, anti-peeing hormone, when blood volume drops, right, you've lost fluids, and therefore blood pressure drops, the posterior pituitary releases ADH, which will increase water reabsorption, right? This is particularly targeting those intercalated cells in the collecting ducts. And it means urine volume decreases, right? Because we are losing less because we are reabsorbing more water. But blood volume and pressure increase, because I said you're going to see opposites, again, in what happens to urine and blood. Decrease there, increase here. This is also a vasoconstrictor to help with pressure. All right? Regulating blood composition of sodium. Again, we're just really reinforcing things we've already said in this chapter, in this video. Sodium is a strong water-attracting solute, largest role in plasma osmolarity, plasma concentration, right? It is the number one extracellular electrolyte, or again, solute. Potassium generally moves opposite of it, and chloride moves with it. So this is a rule to live by. Rules to live by, I should say. Too much sodium means more water and hypertension, right? And this is why we caution people with high blood pressure about their consumption of sodium, because sodium, again, attracts water. So, and water means more volume means higher pressure. So increased risk of heart attacks, stroke, aneurysm, because again the high pressure is pushing against the wall, and edema, because that pressure also influences the exchange in the capillaries. So to regulate this, again, this important ion, we need aldosterone, we need the atrial natriuretic hormone, and ADH helps to control concentrations. All right? Regulated blood composition of calcium. When calcium decreases, right, parathyroid hormone stimulates the distal convoluted tubules to reabsorb more calcium and lose phosphate. So calcium comes back, and that's again because blood calcium was low. That was the reason we made parathyroid hormone, and we're just telling you how it fixes the problem. Parathyroid stimulates the kidney to convert calcidiol to calcitriol, which again this is another way it can establish calcium homeostasis, which means we now have active vitamin D, which means we can absorb more calcium in our small intestines. All right, pH. So the kidneys are able to make buffers, and they're able to determine what buffers are reabsorbed and what are secreted. So here we say your buffers in the body, and again, buffers basically, they prevent changes, and here again, specifically changes in pH on this slide. So proteins are buffers. This bicarbonate is a buffer. Ammonia even have a capacity, right? NH3 can absorb a hydrogen, which free hydrogen ions are acids and make ammonium ions. So ammonia all have a capacity to absorb or release hydrogen to affect pH. And they are made or functioning in the kidneys. So I said we talked about the example of cells in the proximal convoluted tubules that can make bicarbonate, right? So renally, right, so kidneys can rid the body of acids or bases by changing the secretion and reabsorption principally of hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. The pH of blood decreases, all right, so here's our scenario, then the proximal convoluted tubule and collecting ducts will secrete more hydrogen. So if your pH in your blood is dropping, the best thing to do is pee away more of the strong acids. So secretion will increase in this scenario. All right? So regulating the composition of nitrogen waste and elimination of drugs and hormones. So again, nitrogen waste comes from breaking down proteins. That's where we find nitrogen, right? It's, carbohydrates don't have it. Lipids typically don't have nitrogen. So it's nucleic acids and it's proteins. So we mentioned back in the chapter on metabolism that amino acids, when they are used for the purpose of energy, have to be deaminated. We have to remove the nitrogen, all right? And so the amine group NH2 is converted to ammonia, NH3, and ammonium ions, NH4, urea or uric acid, and excreted. So again, if we have more of this buildup, we have to have the kidneys handle it. That's what we're saying here. Water-soluble drugs are excreted in the urine as well by various mechanisms. So we don't have to tell you specifically, but again, and this is true for water-soluble vitamins as well. All right? In summary, right, in the last part of this chapter, the urinary system and homeostasis. What do you need your kidneys for? All right, so we're just recapping everything again. We've gone through all the mechanisms here. We're just reminding you here in the end. What was important to these guys again? Because we've been so detail-oriented in this chapter. So what systems and functions depend on a functioning kidney? Well, again, vitamin D synthesis. And vitamin D allows calcium absorption from the diet. So vitamin D synthesis under the influence of parathyroid hormone, right? And parathyroid hormone, when calcium's low, increases this process. And again, the kidneys are typically responsible for finishing up vitamin D manufacturing. So vitamin D allows calcium absorption. Calcium is your bone health. Again, so what systems does it interact with? Bone health, it's muscle contraction, it's hormone secretion, it's neurotransmitter release from the axons, and again, there are receptors for vitamin D on many cells of the body. So we're not even entirely sure what all vitamin D does. All right, the kidneys are also responsible for erythropoiesis because of erythropoietin. 85% of it is made in the kidneys, and then the rest can be made by the liver. But if you need more oxygen, right, and that's why erythropoietin is made, you have low levels of oxygen in the blood. And here's scenarios: you exercise, high altitudes, or if you lose blood cells, right, hemolysis, the kidney will compensate. We've gone a lot through these two, so this should just be a refresher, right? Kidneys affect blood pressure profoundly and blood concentration profoundly. Water is the blood volume and therefore the blood pressure. Water follows the solutes, and this is absolutely controlled by the kidneys. If the kidneys fail, there is unregulated hyper or hypotension, high or low blood pressure, leading to stroke, heart attack, and aneurysm. Again, you don't have to know what happens because of this. I'm just helping you understand the value of your kidneys, so your book is here, and I'm telling you about it. So blood concentration, kidney is maintaining the isotonic, right, so the normal constant conditions of the body. Hypotonic conditions would lead to hemolysis, right? So if you had, again, this low concentration, right, then fluid enters the blood cells and they rupture. And this would lead to edema, which may cause brain swelling, okay, which could lead to your death, obviously. So hypotonic, not good. So low concentration is not good. High concentrations would lead to lethargy, confusion, muscle cramps, and death. So again, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You have to maintain, right, the constant concentrations. And don't confuse that what happens again in the countercurrent mechanism as a violation of this. It's not. Okay. Lastly, thank your kidneys for the recovery of electrolytes and pH regulation. Again, just recapping what we've already said. So sodiums, potassiums, calcium, balance, absolutely. And these are all very important for neuromuscular function, and absolute concentrations are important, right? I just give you, if potassium is not regulated, cardiac arrest will occur and you will die fairly quickly, right? So pH regulation, again, we've talked about this already quite a bit, but let's go back and, again, this is just summarizing it for you in a couple of slides, that proteins make the body function, and if they lose their structure, they stop working. So that's you can depend on that sentence here. pH will change protein structure, and protein structure will change their function. So changing blood pH will change protein structure. This will cause the central nervous system and heart to stop functioning. So you must regulate pH of the bodily fluids. We finally did it. I hope this helps, and it is a lot to think about. So please take your time, ask questions, and bring up any concerns.